going to introduce our next panel, which is going to be all about transport innovations. And I've got a fantastic group of people coming to be with me, and this is Annette, who's here. So Dr. Annette Pass is Deputy Chief Scientific Advisor at the Department for Transport. Prior to this, she was Head of Innovation at National Highways, and she joined the agency in the late 1990s after completing a doctorate in inorganic chemistry at the University of Leeds. Annette, you're very welcome. Also joining us is Vernon Everitt, our good friend Vernon, who's Transport Commissioner at the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, where he advises Mayor Andy Burnham on the development of the B network, which we'll hear more about shortly. Vernon was previously Managing Director of Customers, Communication and Technology at Transport for London, where I first met him. And among other roles, he's also a Non-Executive Director of Transport for Wales. Great to have you here, Vernon. And then we're joined by John Chapman. John, welcome. He's the UK lead for regional transport bodies for Amazon Web Services, who are one of the summit sponsors, and we're very grateful to you for that. John works with authorities across the whole of the UK to help them understand both how Amazon and Amazon Web Services can support them in implementing more sustainable and citizen-centric innovations. Please will you join me in welcoming our very distinguished panel. So the topic under consideration is transport and innovation. I'm going to ask these panelists 3 questions, but not necessarily just me. What I want you to do is to send your questions in. I've got the Slido here. We've got 29 minutes and 41 seconds to do it. So send your questions now, don't wait. But my question one for everyone, and we'll begin, if we may, with you, Annette, and then we'll go to Vernon, then to John, and we'll reverse the order as we go around, is I want you to look back over the last 5 years, which also includes this period of the global pandemic. And I want to ask you, which do you think have been the innovations in transport that have been most significant, that have made the biggest difference or had the biggest impact from your point of view?
Yeah, well, it's been a really interesting period, hasn't it, for transport? And I think that if you look at the trends that going back sort of, we were 5 years ago really now in the pre-pandemic period, where, perhaps we had more trends towards personal mobility, starting towards micro-mobility. Actually, in terms of the public transport, that had a bit of a setback as far as COVID goes, but we're seeing those trends sort of start to reverse. So I think that there are certain drivers for society and within technology that are kind of playing out into the transport space that were trends that were there before the pandemic, but the pandemic accelerated. So thinking about people living and working more regionally and the importance of their home and their place and the local environment. Thinking about the importance of data and information and kind of flexibility and responsive services in things like, home deliveries and retail and so forth that are really accelerated during the pandemic. And I think that that's sort of playing now in terms of people's expectations of what they want from the transport system. They want something that's flexible, that connects them locally and sort of inter-urbanly, if that's a word. It's not. They want information. They want a good user experience. They want to know exactly what's happening within that transport system. And I think that's where we've made some good advances, but there's a lot more still to do.
So a little bit of back to the future, as you say, and things that were happening pre-pandemic beginning to pick up again, mobility as a service, customized choices. But then this reset from the pandemic, new choices about where people live, where they work, how they consume, how and when they travel. And do you see those things working together, Annette, or are they slightly pushing us in different directions?
I think on the whole they're working together. I think that I think there's work that we can do to kind of bring a more kind of integrated policy in terms of thinking about how we work and connectivity. So there's a lot of work going on in the Department for Transport, thinking about connectivity tool, for example, and looking at kind of how people really work and connect together. But, we're moving into a new society, aren't we? And that's what we have to accept, and we have to be developing the tools and the transport systems that serve the society we're in now.
Great, thank you very much. Now, Vernon, I know this is one of your specialist subjects, but when you look back at the last 5 years and you think about the innovations that have really made a difference in the way transport is working, what would you highlight?
Gray, I think I'd highlight the chasm that there is between what we all experience with our transport network in London with the rest of the country. And it harks back a little bit to our previous conversations at the previous panel and what Andy Haldane was saying about devolution and all the rest of it. It is, in my view, scandalous that nowhere outside London do we have contactless payment just to make it easier for people just to tap and go. Just basic bus services, basic transport provision, rail and so on, is inferior to this. So when we're talking, I think what the pandemic has done is enabled that reset working in parallel with the devolution agenda and city regional mayors saying this isn't good enough. We want London-style systems. And I'm optimistic about that because in Greater Manchester, West Mids and all the rest of it, we mentioned before about the Trailblazer deals that are giving more powers. And that is enabling us, with a bit of money, to be able to actually start executing some stuff. So in a way, I'd like us, I think what we lost, for perfectly understandable reasons, during the pandemic, was the connection between the value you get from transport investment and how that drives productivity. And we need a reset. We need a reset on capital. 5-year capital settlements we've been getting in the regions, very welcome. You can argue about quantum, but that 5-year certainty is enormously helpful. And we now need, I think, to apply that equally to revenue as well. Because in the regions, the one thing which you can touch and feel almost immediately is the bus service. And actually changing the buses, which is what 2/3 of people use anyway, will really change the game. So it's not really a tech innovation. I think it's a change in thinking, Greg, and a reconnection of how you drive productivity through transport as an enabler, which isn't an end in itself, transport. Any of you that have passed Stockport recently on the way into Manchester would have seen what's been happening at Stockport Station, Stockport Interchange, and all the urban realm stuff. Bob Kerslake was mentioned before. He was chair of the Merrill Development Corporation there. If anyone wants to see what good looks like from both a tech and practical perspective, just get off the train and have a walk down into the interchange at Stockport.
Great, so an invitation for everyone to go to Stockport, which is very welcome, Vernon. And I don't want to sound facetious, but I want to ask you just to explain, because you know better than anyone I know, why is it that we've got this digital transport system in London with, you know, single payment system, single ticketing, digitised passenger communication, everything? Why haven't we got that in the rest of the country? And I know that sounds like a simplistic question, and I wanted you just to say a little bit about the B network and what you've been doing there.
Yeah, I think two things. First of all, the creation of the mayoralty in 2000, a single point of political accountability for the whole transport network, or virtually the whole transport network in Greater London. And when you get that, it focuses the mind of the politicians on getting stuff done. Second thing, Greg, as you know, and you encouraged us at TfL to get on with this, is we made all our data freely and openly available.
Yep.
And there was no umming and ahhing about whether stuff was commercially sensitive and all the rest of it. We just got it out there. And I think the power of liberating the data, which has enabled the creation of new products and services for people. City Mapper, as Matt would be the first person to say that his company exists because of the open data agenda. So I think it's partly leadership, political leadership and political accountability, whereby you have to respond to what people want you to do in order to deliver your broader objectives for health and housing and all the rest of it. And the second thing is just having a transport authority that's given a bit of space to innovate.
Great, thank you very much. Now, just tell us a bit about what you've done with the B network, because every time I look at my LinkedIn feed, I see the B network is growing and accelerating, and Mayor Burnham is obviously very proud of what you've been able to achieve. What have you actually done?
Well, it's the work of many hands. It's integration of the public transport and active travel. So there is why I'm really optimistic. It is absolutely liberating working in Greater Manchester at the moment, because you've got people who know where they want to go. You've got a mayor that knows where he wants to get to, 10 district leaders that support him, so a combined authority which is pointed in the right direction. And we're integrating Metrolink, which is the biggest tram network in the UK and already under the control of the combined authority, with the buses. We're doing that in 3 tranches. We did Wigan, Bolton, parts of Bury, Salford last year. Next week is the second phase of bus franchising, and after that 50% of the network will be under the combined authority's control, all done by January 25, when we'll banging integrated capping, tap and go between Metrolink and the buses. And then we'll roll straight into integrating some of the suburban rail lines in Greater Manchester in a similar way to London Overground here. And for the first time then, alongside a huge amount of active travel facilities that are being put in, there really will be, by the end of this decade, Greater Manchester will have a London-style public transport and active travel network.
I feel we should have a quick round of applause. Who wants to join me in doing that?
Well, and most of it's nothing to do with me. It's lots of other people's work, but that's where we're headed.
Fantastic. Now, John, you work for one of the top technology companies in the world, and you have this amazing job of liaising with and working with the transport bodies within the UK. So when you look back over the last 5 years and you think about which technologies, which innovations have made the biggest difference to transport, to logistics, to distribution, delivery, and all of that, where does your mind rest?
Cloud, in a word, so unsurprisingly, but I guess it kind of underpins what the other guys have said. It's really about a fundamental kind of internal change to the way that transport organisations have been running themselves that's allowed them to adopt things like MAS, DRT. These technologies, these terms come from cloud technology, right? That is, as a service, is born of the cloud. And I think transport authorities over the last 5 years, again accelerated by the pandemic, have only really just started to adopt a cloud operating model. If you do that internally, you can pass it on to your citizens. And I think rightly we focus a lot on what the citizens want and the applications and information that can be delivered to the citizens. But actually there's a huge amount of internal transformation that has to happen to run an organization in a modern cloud native kind of way. Now, the TFGM, for example, are doing this brilliantly with the B network. Again, some of the tech guys there would tell you that pace of delivery can't be met without cloud, something you can spin up instantly, but that gives you a much longer term problem if you're not set up to deal with revenue rather than CapEx, moving into more of an OpEx model. And so over the last 5 years, we've seen more and more organizations starting to understand that, look at how they operate internally in order to deliver those things for the citizens, and cloud technology has really been the underpinning piece for that.
Great, and just tell us a bit more then about how does AWS really help that cloud system to work?
Well, AWS is the market-leading cloud technology globally. We have the most services, the most customers, and the most partners as well, importantly. But I think what AWS does that's different is really focus on the customer and work backwards from there. That's something you'll hear a lot of people across Amazon and AWS say. So it's letting the experts be experts in their field and provide them with a technology suite that allows them to deliver the types of things they're talking about. So AWS doesn't go and sell MAS solutions. We don't go and say, hey, we can integrate your bus timetable. It's, well, what are you trying to deliver for your citizens, and how can technology be the enabler? Working with Amazon as a wider logistics business, that's some of the expertise that we can bring in guidance, how we've used technology and how it can help. But really what AWS does is provide the enabling technology for the experts to build what they want to build.
Great, thank you very much. Now, I do want to come on to my second question, which is about the next 5 years. But before we go there, there's a ton of questions have already come in. So can we deal with some of these? John, question for you. What can we do to build public acceptance and understanding of innovation and new technologies? How much do the public need to know in order to use these? And how do we build their consent in this space?
Well, so data sharing, personal data sharing is a really interesting one. We could do a whole panel on that. I think consent for innovation for me has always been relatively simple. You share your location with Google Maps probably 8 times a day, every day. Why? Because you get a benefit from it. It's as simple as that. And again, TFGM are a great example doing this on the B network, the applications they're using, providing real-time information. People will sign up to that without asking them because it's exactly what they want. It's about understanding what the citizen wants, really. That's the key thing. So how much does the citizen need to know about what the technology is? Absolutely nothing. How much do they need to know about what it does for them? Everything.
Right, great. Thank you very much. Vernon, there's a question here from somebody who says that their observation of public and politicians' appetite for policy implementation leads them to be concerned that buses for urban areas are doomed to decline. They say, doomed to decline. How can we guide innovation to help bridge the gap in areas of deprivation left with pitiful connectivity? What's your view about that?
The bus is the lifeline for many people. If you live in the northwest, I mean, 30% of people don't have access, of households don't have access to a car. Until relatively recently, a single bus fare was £4, roughly. It's £1.75 in London, and you got the hopper. So there were built-in barriers to people going for jobs. You know, if you lived in Oldham and there was a job at the airport, it would cost you £8 return to get there, and you know, a good slug of your daily pay's gone. So there's a whole bunch of things that we need to do to overcome that. So make it. I hate this term "managed decline." If I can. I don't know if any of it, I've probably introduced it to you today, but now erase it, please, from your memory banks, because it's a horrible term. I've heard that the bus network or the train networks are in a state of managed decline, and that works completely up to the opposite of where you'll find every regional leader around the country wanting to go. And again, the reason why the buses thrived here is because a load of money was put into put into the revenue. So when Ken revolutionised the bus service under Peter Hendy, Leon Daniels and other colleagues, he just knew that putting investment in there would drive productivity elsewhere. And that's what we've got to hold on to everywhere else in the country. I mean, look what's happened in Sheffield to Sheffield's bus services. 30–40% of it is gone because as far as commercial operators are concerned, it's uneconomic. Well, the whole point of franchising is so that you get hold of the network, start organising it properly, integrate it with other things, make it a bit cheaper, connect up the fares and ticketing, run services to rural areas. 40% of Greater Manchester's rural. I mean, we will have demand responsive. I'm on the board at Transport for Wales. We run a great demand responsive services out in Newport and elsewhere, and it works. So what you have to do to stop this decline is just accept that you need revenue funding to do it. But if you do that, you then say to the local authorities, it's your job to get the revenue up and to get more people on and to narrow the call on that revenue. And in accordance with the devolution agenda, give mayors the powers to raise more money locally. They're already doing it through their precepts and things like that. But this can work. We're showing in the tranche 1 areas, we've got patronage up by 8%. Revenue is nearly 20% above what we predicted. And we're on a roll. There's no reason why we can't do that everywhere else, provided we reconnect the thinking between transport as an enabler of everything else, and not just view everything through the P&L of the combined authorities or the transport operators.
You heard it here first, right? Buses are not dead. Thank you very much, Vernon. Annette, there's a question for you that says, could you just say a little bit more about how you perceive the evolution of AI in transport in particular, without giving us the answer to the next question?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think actually AI is, well, we've seen a huge revolution in that in terms of large language models over the last 12 months or so, which is clearly a huge enabler in terms of productivity and lots of other things, and in terms of dealing with citizens. But actually the kind of AI models that are probably most useful to transport are often the ones that were kind of already there already. So if you think about things like machine learning on AI, CCTV, for example, or you think about AI that's deployed in kind of autonomous vehicles and things like that, then actually there's huge amounts of kind of, if we've got that data out there and we can get that data out, being able to deploy AI now has just opened up that wealth of use cases that probably weren't there before. So I think the deployment of AI is, I think we're only just at the cusp of what that could do in all kinds of transport modes and operations. Probably the challenge will be unlocking the data and the infrastructure in order to get there.
Great, thank you very much. Now, there's a very juicy question that's come in. I'm going to propose it's a yes or no answer. It's only one it's very difficult.
That's
but
daunting.
Does the panel think that the introduction of an appropriate pay-per-mile vehicle policy, right, so road user charging, to replace the current vehicle plus fuel taxes can be fairer to users, whilst importantly playing a major role in influencing a modal shift to sustainable transport? So literally yes or no. John?
I'm going to go with I'm not qualified to answer that one, I'd say.
Vernon?
No.
Annette?
I'm a civil servant. It could be.
All right, okay. So let's go to question 2, shall we? So question 2 is about looking ahead to the next 5 years and thinking about the technologies and the innovations that you think are going to be critical for the next 5 years. I just want to hear a few highlights from you, particularly ones you think that are emerging now that could come to scale or mature. Vernon, you're first, then John, then Annette.
I think all of the tech that we can use to make the highways network more efficient, so urban traffic control, using AI to help us deliver Vision Zero by helping people cross roads more, more safely. The thing that struck me between London and the other regions is that there isn't a single controlling mind over the highways network. There are bits of it, but there's a whole bunch of technologies that can help us make things flow as we allocate road space for more buses, more segregated cycle lanes. But also, we need to make sure that the big city centres continue to be served through vehicular traffic as well, and we have to recognise that some car journeys are essential, actually. And back to the earlier point, people are struggling outside of London, and you can have that sort of road user charging conversation in London, and it can sort of make sense because we've all lived with it for since 2003. That is not the case anywhere else in the country. Anyway, I think the answer to your question, and also so it's highways management and safety and security is where tech can really help us. One of the biggest barriers to people using public transport and active travel is they don't feel safe. And if we can find practical applications of AI and other things to make people both actually be and feel safer, that would be fantastic.
Great, thank you very much, Vernon. John, your thoughts, next 5 years.
Well, AI and the plethora of different things that fall under that, from statistical modelling all the way up to large language models and generative AI, will have a huge impact. I mean, I think there is still a huge revolution to happen in transport planning using statistical modelling before we start talking about LLMs. That will happen in the next 5 years. It will have to, and I think that feeds directly into digital twins, which I know will get talked about a lot, but actually seeing the operational benefits from digital twins, having some of that live rebaselining of demand planning, and actually seeing that operational will really change the game across safety, road allocation, network management. TfL's digital twin, operational digital twin, is now live, went live a few weeks ago. We'll start to see the benefits of that across safety as well as roads. Same in Transport for West Midlands, who are building their own and kind of revamping the way that they're doing their regional strategic model. So digital twins and AI, ML probably first, feeding into those will be the things over the next 2 to 3 years. 5 years is a long time scale in that part of technology.
Yeah, great, okay. Annette, your thoughts, next 5 years?
So I'm definitely going to agree with what you both said about AI and technology, and I hope that brings about better, more integrated planning, better productivity, better accessibility, and making, using public transport, using active travel much more safe and acceptable. So there's that. But actually 5 years isn't a huge amount of time in transport innovation. And when we look at kind of other technologies, and apart from AI, which does explode really quickly, you are looking at multiple years in terms of things coming online. So I think that, I think we'll see a more gradual in terms of autonomy and sort of self-driving vehicles. I think that would be a much more gradual approach, with sort of the high-end models kind of adopting more and more features as we work down. I think that will be a kind of more gradual transition. And I think then, of course, we're also going to see, I hope, the uptake, a big surge in uptake of electric vehicles as well. So people often sort of dismiss that from the innovation list because we know what an EV is, we know what it does, but actually there's a huge amount more to do in terms of decarbonising transport, but actually the scale of deployment of EVs is going to mean, quite a change in terms of how we configure cities and rural landscapes in order to facilitate people charging those vehicles.
Great, thank you very much. Now, a load more questions have come in. So, again, if you don't mind, one question each, and then we'll come to the final question so it's got to be very quick. Annette, someone's asked, if we were having this conference again in 10 years' time, what do you think will have changed?
Well, I hope quite completely integrated transport and, on-demand services, making things more accessible. Maybe we will start seeing some self-driving vehicles, who knows?
Right, okay, that's great. Vernon, there's a question here that says, as we build more homes because we need to, what can we do to ensure that public transport networks innovate, change and grow alongside them, so that when we build homes, we actually build homes that are connected and inclusive? I
think it's a combination of making sure that the authorities have a locked up policy between spatial planning, the economic plan and the transport plan. And you can actually see that happening all around the country. There are cranes up everywhere in and around Greater Manchester, but a lot of the resi areas they're just not building car park spaces, and it's designing it in from the very beginning. I think is the answer to that one.
Thank you very much. And then John, there's a question here that says, there's a wealth of data that can support digital twins for decision making and everything else, but so much of the data is either poorly managed or it's behind paywalls, or staff are lacking digital skills. What do we need to do to really optimize the use of the data we already have?
I mean, that comes back to the first point around internal transformation for how organizations are set up. We're starting to see transport organizations realize that more. I think there just needs to be a bit more of a realization of that. To distill that down to a 5-second answer, that really does come down very often to CapEx versus OpEx funding in transport organizations. How can we fund the skills we need to get in from a revenue point of view, because it's their ongoing, their salaries, rather than a big chunk of money to go and build a road, and what's the transition there? Do we need to look at that differently? That's what we get told by our customers. Thank
you very much. We've got 46 seconds. Final question, just a few thoughts. What are the ingredients of places that know how to optimize innovation and technology in the transport space? A few thoughts, John.
Gabriella said something great earlier, which is public-private potential, right? Which is the 3 Ps. I'm going to adopt that. I think working with private organizations, particularly like Amazon Logistics, I mean, we deliver 220,000 packages a day by walking in Manhattan. We've taken high double figures percentage number of vans off the road in central Manchester and placed them with cargo bikes because their active travel is so good that we as an organisation want to come and work there, want to invest in it. So having that place-based approach and looking at how that can adopt more public-private potential, that's the key for me.
Great. And Annette, what's the characteristics of places that know how to optimise all this tech?
I think, just as you walk into any supermarket and they know exactly what you're going to buy before you want to buy it, because they know exactly who's walking in there and who those people are. I think having a place-based system that really understands what the demographic is, what they need for each different age segment or society segment is really going to drive those transport services.
Very, very good point. Vernon, what's your thought?
I'll end where I started, Stockport.
Right, well, ladies and gents, we're perfectly on time. Please join me in thanking John, Vernon and Annette. Thank you very much indeed.